You've been thinking of great questions. I'm going to start things off by saying, last time I saw you, you didn't have an Oscar, and now you do. How has life changed?
I don't know that it's necessarily changed, but I can tell you, if I go back to that story about my grandparents owning a movie theater, I always watched the Academy Awards with my parents every single year, and I never really did think that I would be a part of the industry, let alone actually having that opportunity to go up there. So that moment was an incredible moment in time, and I had both my parents there with me in the audience, and I will never ever forget being able to get up there and do that. It was an amazing moment.
Yeah, I mean, I was so happy for you, so well done.
Thank you.
Let me ask this big question. Wreck-It Ralph, the first one, was about arcade gaming. This is about the internet. Do you ever think you might have bitten off more than you can chew with something this vast?
You know, it's interesting. We spend years developing these stories, and when you come up with the idea, and the directors did, of going into the internet, I should take a step back. I really feel like you shouldn't make a sequel unless you have a great idea. And so when Rich and Phil started to think about what if we took these two characters and left the small town arcade and really went into the internet, you got really excited thinking about what that could be like and what it could be like in animation. And so as the story started to evolve, to your exact point, you start feeling like, well, how do you actually represent the entire internet? How do you really tell a story within that? And it took a while until we figured out that what we needed to do is create a bit of a crisis between the two characters, between Ralph and Penelope. They go in to solve a problem that she has, which is to fix her game. But once she goes into the internet, she actually discovers this world that she falls in love with. And we have to see that friendship go through that moment in time where two people may have to actually separate and live in different places. And that, to me, got us very excited. And that then starts to tell you what part of the internet you actually need to go in and explore.
Just tapping back to Zootropolis/Zootopia, I love how the search bar character feels like the exact opposite from the sloth.
Yes.
It's like a million miles a minute. And I can't wait to see them side by side because it felt like you were getting something out of you.
Yes, no, it's true. It's one of those things, and it's the thing I love about Phil and Rich. They always start with the characters themselves. So you think to yourself, they got to go somewhere, they got to figure out how they're going to get around this internet. What if they go to a search bar? But then who is this Knows More character? What is he actually going to be like? So they sort of combined a little bit of Truman Capote with Droopy. That was the idea when we went to Alan Tudyk, who voices him, and then said, let's go and do the thing that we all get frustrated by, which is the internet is always trying to correct or tell us where they think we're trying to go. So that became kind of the comedy of the scene and the fun for it.
The trailer, I saw it yesterday when I was watching Incredibles 2, sorry to brag, and the princess scene absolutely destroyed the room. I mean, in the best possible way. How have you been enjoying the reaction you've been getting to the first trailer?
It's been amazing. I mean, it is a little bit like the sloth scene in Zootopia. When you put it out there, people immediately relate to it in a way and see the potential and the comedy in the film, which of course is what we're trying to do, is tell people what a great story and what great characters we have, and we got to figure out how to do that in a trailer of 2 or 2.5 minutes. And I think the princesses kind of encapsulate what the film is about, and from the standpoint of the comedy side of it, let's take things and kind of put them on their end. Like, let's surprise the audience as we go through the internet. Let's show things that people didn't expect. And it really was one of those scenes early on when someone pitched it in the story room. What if we go into a site like Oh My Disney, and what if we meet the princesses? What would that scene be like? And you can just see the room light up and see people really start talking about, well, what if this princess said that? What if it built like this? And you really get to enjoy that moment come to life, and then to finally see it on the big screen.
Who is the genius that suggested that the crystal slipper gets smashed?
Such a good question. I believe that was Jim Reardon, who's our head of story.
He's devious.
He is totally devious, yes.
You must ask questions. I'm sure you have loads. So I want to ask a couple more, but do keep thinking of them and put your hand up, and then I'll point at you, and all very fun. I was on set, so to speak, for the first Wreck-It Ralph, and I was mildly obsessed with the number of references and allusions and, you know, all those nods and hat tips. This movie just knocks that out of the water. Even in just that princess scene, there's a hashtag shiny t-shirt that Moana's wearing. How much fun was it sneaking in all these little nods and allusions in this movie?
I think the team has had a blast doing that. All the princesses have t-shirts that relate to some aspect of who they are as a character, but then throughout the internet we can give those nods that people can find, and it is sort of like the first Wreck-It Ralph, where when they were traveling through the chords, we would see graffiti up on the walls, and it was real, you know, things that inside video gamers would really enjoy, but the rest of the audience would just see as graffiti. Well, it's the same thing throughout the internet. There are things that the people who are very very savvy on the internet will see and find, and for everyone else it'll just be background to them. So it's a way to kind of provide a whole nother level of comedy through the film.
It's going to be very rewatchable. I love how Pocahontas has flowing hair throughout. I think it's time for a question. I have one very eager person who deserves first go. Step up to the plate, please.
Hi there. The one thing that we haven't really seen yet is an antagonist. I wonder if there's a baddie in this.
So, as I was sort of alluding to a few minutes ago, really the idea of the story is two characters who go from a small town, so the arcade in this case, to the large city, to London or to New York. And one falls in love with it, and the other just wants to get back home. And so the baddie, if you will, in the film becomes Ralph battling the concept that he might have to actually let Penelope lead her own life. And it really is a very emotional story from the standpoint that I think for parents, it is that moment in time where you have to say goodbye to your children when they're going to go off to college. Or for kids, it's that moment in time when two best friends are going to separate, either because they're going to different schools or because families are moving. And we try our hardest in the beginning of the film to remind the audience of how much we love these two characters together, which makes it that much harder to watch those two characters have to actually split apart. So there's not technically a villain other than the villain within Ralph's head, which is him not wanting to let her go.
And also, Alan Tudyk was the bad guy in the first film, and he's playing the search bar guy, so maybe not. Any other questions? Anyone feeling eager just yet? This lady up at the front. You don't need a microphone, do you?
No.
You'll be fine.
I've got a loud voice. I was just thinking, you said it takes years to sort of bring the story to life, but the internet's developing all the time and there are new trends all the time. So did you have a kind of, were people allowed to come with new ideas for the story like during the process, or was there a cut-off point where you were like, no more new things?
It was always a battle to figure out how do you make a movie about the internet and not have it feel outdated within 2 or 3 years, or 2 or 3 months for that matter. So we tried our hardest to not do references that are very, very specific to what might be happening at this moment in time, and think about it more generally. So when you think about a search bar and you think about the idea of autofill, that's something that will probably always continue. And trying to make it feel like it's those ideas within the internet that we're leaning into deeply. eBay allowing it to be this auction site, and not try to get too specific as to what they're selling at this moment in time, really trying to stay more general. But it was the big battle because, again, every single day something new is happening on the internet. And when it came to the concept of figuring out what kinds of viral videos was Ralph going to be making, how do we make those videos feel like something that still in 5 or 10 years people are either going to recognize or potentially still be doing. So you saw early on those cat videos. It feels like that is a piece of the internet that will continue for a long, long time. So we try to lean more into those areas as much as possible.
Those cat videos that we saw, like the early versions of, struck me as the kind of thing where I would happily watch 2 hours of that. When this movie was part of the challenge, filleting down what you wanted to put in it, because with it being such a vast array of possibilities, how hard was it to get it to what it needed to be?
It's a great question. It was really very difficult. And I find with most movies in the very beginning, you have all of these ideas as you're trying to kind of figure out the story itself. And what is the most interesting thing that you gravitate towards is what will be fun and funny. So you create all these scenes, but not all those scenes necessarily are supporting the story. Yeah. So as the story starts to really refine itself, you start to have to let go of these moments that you love. And it's one of the most difficult things in the world, where you have to say that sequence is going to be so funny in the movie, but it's actually not supporting the story, and we have to lose it. So we sort of evolve over the course of time. We make our movie 9 times. We actually screen it 9 times over the course of 2 years. And in those moments, we're constantly taking things out, putting new things in, all trying to make sure that the main storyline is what's being supported.
Now, we see a mention of it in the footage we saw today, but Sonic sounds like he'll be back very briefly. Yes. He doesn't stick around for long in the first one. That was not a joke. But with this movie, will we be getting a little bit still, a few more game references as well?
Absolutely. We wanted to make sure for the people who saw the first film and really enjoyed the video game side of it, that we didn't forget that piece of it. So the very opening of the film, through the first act really, we are in the world of the video game arcade. So we try to make sure we have as much fun as possible with all of the characters, Enki, Sonic, Robotnik, Chun-Li, all of these characters come back, and we really get to have a good time with them before our main characters head off to the internet.
So hyped that Robotnik's back. Okay, who else has a question? This lady in green. Just throw it, please don't.
Back to the Disney princesses, if that's okay. I think I've read somewhere that you got as many of the original voice actors back as possible. I wonder if you could talk about that process a little bit.
Yeah, it's a great question. So we got all the original voices back to do the princesses, and it was, I gotta say, it's probably one of the most amazing parts of my career. Weirdly, I never thought that I would actually be on a movie that would have all of them together. Working on it, and
no one did, Clark.
No, you're right.
No one.
It was a surprise. I think what was so great about it was when they came in to record. After they did the recording session, we would have them meet with the animation team to talk about their character, because for a lot of these animators, they had never actually worked with these specific princess characters. And when they talked about what it meant to them, being this voice, it was very emotional to hear that even 20, 30, 40 years later, for them, it was a defining moment in their life. And they still felt connected to that character, and they really, really deeply cared about it. And as we were evolving the scene, we said to them, think about how your character would actually do this. They were given lines that gave a direction, but we said, you got to do it within the character that you know. And they just had a blast doing that. And then last year, I guess it was at D23, we actually had all those female actresses come up on stage. A couple couldn't make it, but basically everybody else was there. And it was a really, really crazy moment, but it was awesome. It's really amazing to meet all of them.
To follow up your question, what was it like making the decisions, the conversations around how you visually represent in the modern Disney animation style characters that we know so well from the original type of animation?
Yeah, I think that was one of the hardest parts. So in our minds, these are not the actual princesses. They're the avatars who live within the world of Oh My Disney. So they're all slightly caricatured to try to make them all feel as one. But most of those characters have never been in CG before. So you see Ariel, or you see Snow White, or you see Cinderella, and it's pretty amazing that the audience accepts it, given that we all know them as hand-drawn characters that have never really lived in the world of CG. But that was the key element, was figuring out what could we do to make it feel and evoke what we all know about them, but bring them all into one consistent kind of look.
It helps that you have Moana where you go, yes, that feels right, and if you put her next to the right one, it kind of works out.
Yeah.
More questions? Anyone else? Alex, man in the middle, and then we'll get to you at the front, particularly as you have Alice on your dress.
Hi. In the first Ralph film, one of the things that was really memorable to me was the music. It was really evocative of 80s gaming. Where did you go to find music that said internet?
It's a really great question, because it was the thing we debated the most. How do we put music into the internet that makes it feel like the internet? So we're making a choice not to actually have songs in that part of the film at all, in terms of representing what the internet is, and instead leaning on our composer, Henry Jackman, to really bring the world of the internet to life. And he's doing a very interesting thing, of course, taking a traditional score with a large orchestra, but also trying to bring in a bit of a digital element to it that feels modern, that lets us really land what that world is. So we can see the contrast between his score for the arcade and then his score for the internet itself.
Might I ask, now it just crops into my head, when it comes to getting the licenses to represent, say, Amazon or eBay or what have you, what were those phone calls or emails like? Were you like, so we'd like you to be in a sequel to one of the most beloved recent films? So they went, yep, fine. How easy or hard was it?
It was a big debate in our minds. Were we going to use actual websites or not? Now for the storytelling itself, and you can see that with Knows More and with Buzz2, we really create a lot of websites that are our own. We felt strongly about that, trying to make sure that it felt original, but we also wanted the internet to feel like the world we all know. So we wanted to have Twitter, and we wanted to have Amazon, and we wanted to have Snapchat or Netflix all included in this movie. And as a result, we said to ourselves, let's put everything in that we can. And we actually went around the world. So if you look carefully at a lot of those shots, there are websites from all over the world included in it, just to make it feel like the internet we do all explore every single day. And then ultimately our hope was, when we did so and we showed those shots to the outside world, that the companies would be excited to be included. And it's been a great way to see that they love to be represented. But we've never really gone out to them to say, can we? Because we can use it within parody. But we're excited to know that they're happy to be included in the film.
Question at the front we had.
I just wanted to ask, were any of the
Microphone time.
Okay. Were any of the princesses harder or easier than each other to recreate for this movie?
In terms of the design,
The like everything about them really, like what they looked like, how they acted. Were they easier than or harder than each other
well,
to
I think
redo?
Pocahontas is, to your point, is not easy because of the fact you got to always have her hair flowing from that standpoint and make sure that that's right. Rapunzel is always a difficult character because she has all that hair, so then it becomes about staging and how do you do it in a way that makes it feel like you see the hair but you don't see all of the hair because there's a complexity to that side of it. Really the most difficult thing is that all of them have completely different clothing and hair grooms, and that means a lot of work for the rigging team to actually be able to make it look and feel very realistic in terms of CG. So they all are in their own ways complicated to recreate.
We've only got a few minutes left, but that doesn't mean you can't ask your question, so please do be brave, put your hand up. Right at the back, we're just going to let this man do a bit of exercise because he loves running around the microphone, and he's going to hand you a microphone.
I was going to ask, how important was it to land the kind of message of morality and using the internet, where you saw kind of Ralph being quite affected? Obviously, a lot of teenagers also get affected by using the internet. Just if you want to comment on that.
I think it's really important. I mean, it was a conversation we had early on to say we want to obviously create a story that's fun and entertaining for the audience, but to go into the world of the internet and not describe both aspects, those things that are amazing about how the internet can connect the world, how we can find things, how a steering wheel would actually be available on eBay that could solve the crisis of having her game be fixed. It was important, but on the other side of it, it's a really complicated world, and kids today are navigating it. And I think it's important when you tell stories to figure out, are there ways to give an in for parents to have a conversation with their kids themselves? And so that comments room is one of a few scenes in the room where we hope that it will start a conversation, that parents themselves or kids can start to ask questions about what is that and how does that work and how should I feel about it, because it is one of the most complicated parts about what the internet brings to our world today.
And it's something we all suffer or all deal with throughout our lives. It's not going anywhere, and that's part of the immortality of what you're talking about. This is a topic that's never going to disappear.
Absolutely. Right.
Strangers behind keyboards saying things. Any other questions? Anyone feeling brave? Steady here in red. Sorry, just a quick bit of pass the parcel.
Were there any technical issues to overcome with this film? I know in the past there have been issues with fur and hair and snow. Was there anything unique to this film that you had to overcome?
Yeah, there's a couple things. One is the crowds are massive in the film because we need to make it feel like there are all these users online all the time. So that's in and of itself a big complex piece. The second part is we go to so many parts of the internet, we have all of these characters. So just the design, if you think about the princesses themselves, you have to build all of them for this one scene. You got eBay, we need to have eBay have its own look and feel. We go to BuzzTube, Yes, and her and the team that she works with has their own look and feel. So that creates another layer of complexity within it. But one of the biggest ones actually is figuring out how do you put signage throughout the entire internet in a way that feels digital, that's moving, that's not just a blank sign that doesn't change. It needs to feel like it's active as the internet is itself. So you have to create all those signs, you have to animate all those signs, and then you have to figure out, and the team's done an incredible job, a computer system, that will, a piece of software that will actually place those signs in the world of our shots and actually have them come to life. So the immense size of what the internet was probably, what the internet is probably one of the biggest things our team had to go out and accomplish.
I think we have time for about 2 more questions, but there was one right here. We're so prepped. Go.
You may not want to answer this question, but I was wondering, when you were coming up with the ideas for what you could do, were there any ideas you thought, like, that's brilliant, that's hilarious, but we can't put it in a Disney film?
Yes. There are parts of the internet that we of course joke about, but know that within a Disney film you're never gonna see. So yeah, obviously we have fun in the story room, and there's those moments, but fundamentally we know we're telling a story that really needs to be grounded in a world that the family wants to come see too. So we're careful in our choices as to where we go.
You're referring to pop-ups, aren't you? I understand. Okay, the final question with such vigour. Yes.
Hi. With regards to the scene about the Disney princesses, were there any other ideas that were in the works that could celebrate Disney, like getting together all the villains or something like that, that you were trying to fight against or campaigning for?
You know, it's interesting because when that scene got developed, there was this balance of making sure that it has to fit within the story itself. And when you watch the movie, it feels, when you see it out of context, like it's a moment for us just to have fun and poke a little bit of fun at ourselves and let the audience enjoy that aspect of it. But when you see it in the body of the film, it really is critical to the storytelling and propels Penelope forward in terms of her journey that she's going to have on the internet. So for us, we felt like we needed to focus whatever the scene was going to be in Oh My Disney towards her actual story. When we talked about all the ideas we could explore and all the things that could happen in Oh My Disney, there was a list that went on for pages and pages and pages, all the different characters we could try to include, all the different bits of comedy. But again, it comes to that moment of saying we need to stick to what is important to the storytelling so that the audience doesn't get distracted or get lost in terms of what her journey is going to be. So for us, the princesses represented that because she is technically a princess from the first film. She chooses not to be that at the end of the film. She chooses to want to be the president and not a princess. We make a joke of that part of it. But for us, it felt like that was the most organic way to put her into that scene and have the princesses give her a piece of information that's going to help her on her journey.
I can only imagine some animators have snuck stuff in the background, and then in the second to final cut, you'll be like, oh, come on. We can't have Ursula there, come on. Guys, put your hands together and say thank you to all of you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And see you next time. Yes, I think that would be.